In the Gilgo Beach case, everyone thinks about the physical evidence, but what if the biggest clues weren't even physical? What if they were invisible? That's what we're diving into today, these digital ghosts. We're going to look at how phone data lets investigators rebuild the last crucial moments of a victim's life. And that quote really hits the nail on the head. For so long, those gaps, the time between the last call and when someone disappeared, they were just black holes, total voids. But now, digital forensics is like a light in that darkness. It can actually fill in those gaps, revealing patterns and movements that, honestly, physical evidence just can't touch. It's potentially redrawing the entire map of this whole case. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to put on our digital forensics hats. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how they track phones, yep, even burner phones, to build a case almost entirely out of data. But before we go any further, there's a really important legal point we need to cover.
So, just so we're all on the same page, the suspect in this case, Rex Heuermann, has been charged, but he is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. That's fundamental. What we're doing here is looking at the how, the investigative methods themselves, using information that's already out there in the public domain.
Look, the Gilgo Beach case, it's always been this huge, tangled mess of discoveries and questions, right? But here's what makes it so different from, say, a cold case from the 70s. The victims lived in the modern world. They had phones, and every phone leaves behind a trail, a digital footprint of calls, texts, and location pings. And you can take all those footprints and start comparing them, looking for overlaps. And that's what makes this data so incredibly powerful. Think about it. Human memory? It's shaky. We forget things. We mix up times. But phone data? It's objective. It doesn't have a bad day. It doesn't forget. It's just a cold, hard, time-stamped log of what happened, who called who, and, crucially, where they were when they did it.
All right, so imagine you're an investigator and you've just been handed a mountain of this raw data. It's overwhelming. Where do you even start? Well, it almost always boils down to 4 key tools. This is like the foundation of the entire digital forensics toolkit.
So you've got call detail records, cell site location information, tower dumps, and something called device linkage. These are the absolute building blocks. Let's break them down one by one. First up, call detail records, or CDRs. Think of this as the phone's basic diary. Now, it's not going to tell you what was said in a call, but it proves that a call happened. It's that first, essential layer, who called who, at what time, and for how long.
Okay, next we have CSLI. And listen, this is a really important distinction. This is not GPS. It's not going to give you a perfect little dot on a map. What it is a record of which cell towers your phone was talking to or shaking hands with. So it puts a device in a general area. Think a few city blocks or maybe a couple of miles out in the country at a very specific time.
All right, now this next one is really cool because it totally flips the script. It's called a tower dump. Instead of tracking one specific phone, you go to a single cell tower and you ask it, hey, show me every single phone that connected to you between, say, 10 p.m. and midnight. And just like that, you can find 2 phones that were in the same place at the same time, even if they never once called or texted each other. And that brings us perfectly to device linkage. This is the secret sauce for dealing with burner phones. See, a burner phone might be anonymous, but it's not immune to having habits. If you see 2 different burner phones that always travel the same route to work or always ping the same towers near a specific house, you can start to digitally tie them together. You're not tracking a name, you're tracking a pattern of life. So, those are the 4 main tools in the toolbox. Now for the really interesting part. How do you put them all together? How do you layer all that data to actually build a map of someone's last hours? I mean, how do you take all these little digital echoes and turn them into a clear story? It's really a puzzle. You have to layer the information one piece on top of another until a picture starts to emerge. So, you always start with an anchor point, the last confirmed thing that happened with a definite timestamp, a text, a call, whatever. From there, you start laying down the CSLI tower hits, and that builds you a kind of corridor of movement. The magic happens when you look for the weird stuff, the anomalies. A point where the path suddenly changes, or where a tower dump shows a new phone suddenly appearing in the same area. And then you find it, the point of silence, that last tower connection before the phone just goes dark. And that location, that often becomes ground zero for the physical search. And you have to realize today's tech is putting this whole process on steroids. You've got AI that can chew through data from multiple victims at once, spotting tiny patterns a human investigator might just miss. And they're fusing all this data together now, phone records with car data, with license plate readers. It's not just about one ping anymore. It's about watching a device hop from tower to tower like digital stepping stones and building a full narrative of movement. Okay, but here it is. This might be the single most important thing to understand in all of this. For all the amazing things this data can do, there is a huge gap between what it shows and what you can actually prove in court. Let's really spell this out. The phone data can prove presence. It can put a phone at a location, but it takes something physical like DNA to prove who was holding that phone. The data shows two numbers made contact, but it can't tell you the content of that call. It proves an association, that two phones travel together, but it can never, ever prove criminal intent. And that gap, well, that gap is everything. So here's the bottom line. This digital map is just that, a map. It's an unbelievably powerful tool for pointing investigators in the right direction. It can lead them to a car, to a house, to a person. But for it to mean anything in a courtroom, that digital trail has to connect to something real, something physical. We're talking forensics, a witness, actual video footage. So, knowing all that, knowing the limits of the data, why are we all still so captivated by the Gilgo Beach case? I mean, what is it about this one that just keeps us completely hooked, waiting for the next update? You know, I think it's because this case lives at this perfect crossroads of something ancient and something brand new. You've got this deep, primal fear of the unknown monster, but you're pairing it with this absolute fascination with modern tech. It's been this terrifying, unsolved puzzle for so long, and now, for the very first time, we're seeing these new tools bring actual clarity, measuring the timeline in a way that was never possible before. We're literally watching them trace these digital ghosts onto a real map. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? When all is said and done, after every byte of data is analyzed and every timeline is mapped out, what's going to be the final word here? Is it going to be the invisible digital trail, or is it going to be the hard physical evidence that has to connect that trail to a person? Honestly, that's the question that sits at the very heart of this whole thing.